Well, thanks a lot, Jack. It's good to be back. You know, you live in a really crappy place when you come to Columbus and it looks really great. Like, what a good city this is. Because I don't know if you guys have ever been to Phoenix, but it's like the worst city in the US, I think. So I've been there for a year and a half. I went kicking and screaming. It was one of those what we do for love kind of situations. And everybody said, oh, it'll be a great experience. There's so much sprawl there. You'll, spend your time trying to reform, trying to retrofit suburbia kind of activity. We'll see how that goes. It's quite a challenge. But it is great to be back. Columbus is a good town. I complained about it all the time when I was here, but now that I come back, it looks really beautiful to me. Like there's a lot of great things going on here. So I want to, as Jack said, I do a lot of research on new urbanism. I am one of the few academics who is a card-carrying new urbanist, and I'm okay with saying that. At the new urbanism conferences, there's only about a handful of us that show up and are actively engaged with it, which I think is a shame. Because new urbanism is a set of very dedicated people who are trying to do the right thing. They're failing oftentimes on getting their principles implemented. So the question is, are you going to help them move in the right direction, or are you going to sit back and criticize what they're doing? That's kind of how I feel about it. I'll start out with a very positive picture of what's happening right now. I think a lot of people in the country are feeling good about this recent election and the possibilities and things we can accomplish with our new president, and things are looking really good. And I think a lot of people have come out into the public square, so to speak, both literally and figuratively. And I think a lot of people in not only new urbanism, but all the related movements, smart growth, livable cities, sustainable cities, APA to a large extent, Project for Public Spaces, walkable communities. There's a lot of these groups. And they're all out there doing very similar kinds of things. I think they're all pretty much focused on trying to build sustainably, trying to build the compact, diverse, walkable neighborhood. And we can debate about how compact it needs to be, how diverse it needs to be, what does sustainability mean. But I think when it comes right down to it, there's an awful lot more overlap than there is disagreement. I find that very comforting, actually. And I think a lot of people in these movements are feeling right now like their time has come. And we've got a new administration. The stimulus package might actually do a lot to fund public transportation. So that's going to be a really great motivator for now really starting to do something to turn sprawl around, to build compact, sustainable, walkable, diverse neighborhoods. And the other part of this that's really fuels my interest, and I think it really is there supporting all of these movements simultaneously, is that we are resting on a long tradition of building sustainable neighborhoods, sustainable communities, and it's been there since the 19th century. They didn't talk in terms of sustainability, but folks like Ebenezer Howard and Clarence Stein and with the Garden Cities movement, they really were very much focused on building compact, walkable, diverse, transit-oriented development. It was in, they didn't have as much a sense of social justice as we might now. Clarence Perry and his neighborhood unit was saying all sorts of inexcusable racist things, but if you can get beyond that, there really was a focus on very similar kinds of things to what we're trying to do today. And even Jane Jacobs and, of course, her beloved Greenwich Village, she, of course, didn't think much of garden cities, didn't think much of regional planning either, and that's the image on the upper right there, Clarence Stein's regional city model. But yet, even though she didn't really agree with the whole notion of planning the complete community in a greenfield kind of setting and top down and, you know, here's the planned community, take it from there. She didn't agree with the process involved in trying to get there. The end point was very similar between these, whether you're talking about Jane Jacobs and her bottom-up, process-oriented way of getting to that sustainable, diverse, walkable neighborhood, or whether you're talking about the Garden Cities approach. It's very much aligning. I see the stars aligning, I guess is how you could put it. And I think one reason why the stars are aligning to some degree is that there's a common enemy out there. And when you have a common enemy and it's so visible and everybody can see the degradation to the environment, the havoc that's being played on with these car-dependent communities, the interrelated economic and social and environmental problems of this unsustainable way we've been building the American city for the past 50 years, we all do start to converge and have a common goal. Now let me just, I'm going to pick on the new urbanists because they are so visible and they are out there and they are being advocates. And they do have a big problem. They have several problems. But one of the biggest problems, and the one that I've been really focused on the last couple of years, is the problem of not building inclusively. And basically what has happened is that new urbanism is more and more being thought of as an aesthetic movement. And this is a death knell to new urbanism because it cannot survive as an aesthetic movement. The architects hate it pretty much universally. They think the architecture is boring and, you know, retrograde and nostalgic, heaven forbid. And so what it really needs to rest on are these underlying social objectives, things having to do with walkability and diversity and building sustainably. But what the problem new urbanism is having right now and has been having is its failure to deliver on some of those key principles. So as critics are very quickly point out, where are these walkable, diverse, compact developments? And they're not really, you know, the problem is they're not living up to their stated goals. And this problem is really very intrinsic to the movement, and it goes back to the 19th century. It was the same problem that the Garden Cities had, the regional city model of Clarence Stein, the RPAA had this. If you know anything about planning history, you'll be familiar with these terms. They all had a very similar kind of problem when it came to advancing these social goals. And the paradox that's getting set up here, well, there's a set of paradoxes. For example, the notion that you want to build socially inclusive neighborhoods, but at the same time, you want really high design quality. Well, in a Western capitalist democracy, those are competing principles that don't necessarily go well together. Here's another one. You want to increase the supply of these walkable, compact, diverse neighborhoods, but at the same time, you really want to, actually, the developers are very interested in keeping the supply down so that there continues to be demand for walkable, compact, diverse neighborhoods. You want to, or the new urbanist model is about increasing diversity, social diversity, and that's mainly economic diversity, but it can also be ethnic, racial, age diversity is very important. But at the same time, there's everything about community, that this model is going to hang together based on the ability to foster a sense of community within these developments. Well, these two concepts clash, and that is still needing to be worked out and talked about more directly. On the matter of codes, and this relates to diversity in the sense that we need to have a refocusing of the way we code our neighborhoods because We want to be able to accommodate the underlying mix going on, and for that to succeed, the new urbanists will say, we need to have a focus on outward form so that underlying mix can hang together coherently and not scare people away. At the same time that there is this focus on the form-based code as the way to be able to accommodate diversity, there is also simultaneously a push to decrease the regulatory burden that communities have. So you will often hear a discussion about if we could just do away with all regulation and have a clean slate, get government completely out of the way, then what might naturally evolve is something that is naturally diverse and will be organically engendered. And then finally, as another example of these sort of intrinsic paradoxes, and there are actually many more than I'm including here, but the notion that you want to add the elements that will foster better community, like sidewalks and infrastructure. Those are actually elements that are going to increase your development cost. At the same time, you're trying to decrease development costs to make it a more palatable, a more financially successful model. So in all of these different ways, these sort of competing, conflicting, paradoxical goals are working against the ability of new urbanism to go out there and deliver on its goals. I think that sustainability and green building and the notion of, we've got to really be in touch with environmental objectives and build sustainably, that actually is often working against new urbanism because it does tend often, it will add cost to the bottom line of a project. So the point to think about before I get into this next section is why can't the new urbanists actually achieve this objective of diversity? And here's another really key point, and people have been bringing this up a lot lately. Isn't the market tanking right now? And so aren't we actually getting more affordable housing in our developments? And isn't that really a good thing? And won't that really help with this whole agenda of creating a more socially inclusive kind of neighborhood model? A couple of things are going on that are exacerbating that issue or the ability to achieve that goal. One is that, I don't know if you've seen this graph, but what's happening with housing values is that even though right now they are falling, they have so far to go in many places to get on par with what an affordable community might look like, that we haven't reached nearly the level that they would need to fall to right now. And so this chart is showing you that all the way, what's happened in the last decade was just so out of whack with everything else that values would need to drop considerably to get back to the 1950s kind of level of housing affordability. The other issue in response to this notion of, well, isn't the market declining such that we do have more affordable housing, and that would be good for new urbanism, is that a lot of the more affordable homes that we're seeing now, especially in an area like Phoenix, which has so many foreclosures, these affordable units are not within the context of a walkable neighborhood. So you haven't really addressed in any way the goal of having more diversity and having more affordability in a new urbanist neighborhood by having all these foreclosures. You haven't hit on that because the foreclosures might be on a very peripheral kind of site, or they might be in an inner city neighborhood that has very few services attached to it. So this goal of trying to create the diverse and walkable and well-serviced and well-functioning neighborhood all together, which is the new urbanist model, is not strengthened significantly by the at least right now, by the increasing affordability. The other thing that's happening to sort of exacerbate the problem new urbanism is having in maintaining some level of diversity and affordability is this pent-up demand. And I don't know if you are familiar with some of these recent books that have been published, and they're very much about the fact that, and I love this graph on the bottom left there from Dowell Myers, who says this very minority group has been dictating what has been getting built. And I'm sure if you're in planning, you've heard this before, this minority dictatorship of new construction, such that our delivery of smaller units, of units that would be more affordable in a neighborhood, in a walkable neighborhood, just aren't there. So those changing demographics, and in addition, the pent-up demand that is resulting from longer commutes, rising gas prices, and people wanting to live more urbanistically. Those are also getting in the way, so to speak, of new urbanism's ability to build affordably. Then we have this figure from Tony Nelson, who says, you know, we have this deficit of 35 million small lot attached homes by 2025 exactly because of this problem of you know, this minority dictating housing construction. I've been seeing a lot of this kind of talk lately too, that actually the new urbanists have been predicting this for a while now, that what's going to happen at the periphery are, you know, those are the next slums, because poor people, you drive till you qualify, right? And as all these foreclosures are happening on the periphery, lower income people are moving out there. So, oh, by the way, that's great for urbanism, but what's happening to those neighborhoods at the outskirts? Here's a study that just came out showing that, you know, if you're trying to do a new urbanist development along a rail line, and that would be called a TOD, Transit-Oriented Development, actually what's happening there in many cases, in many cities, is that the price is just skyrocketing because of that pent-up demand, because of changing demographics, the pressure on living more sustainably, living closer to a rail stop, all of that pressure is really coming home right now, because it's, they found that many of the areas around these transit stations were pretty much unaffordable, even though they started out on the new urbanist model of, you know, let's have walkable, diverse, transit-served kinds of neighborhoods. And then for the, oh, you can't read this at all, but this is just a screenshot, a page off the New Urbanism website that says, you know, urbanism, this whole thing that's happening right now, all these different factors, what it's meaning is that urbanism is really highly valued. If you build in an urban kind of way, new urbanism, you're going to make a lot of money because the prices are going up, there's really high demand. These are the places that are not actually losing value the way those foreclosed homes and other less served neighborhoods might be. And so this is, and they're touting this ability of urbanism to have an advantage over non-urbanistic kinds of environments. So you see where I'm getting with all of this is that you have this problem of this paradox built in, that on the one hand, urbanism is defined by diversity. The very core of new urbanism as a set of principles is about building the socially diverse, compact, walkable neighborhood. On the other hand, all these factors are conspiring together to create a situation where it becomes unaffordable, and they will never get there. All right, I've been screaming about this for a while now to my new urbanist friends, and they think I'm a big pain in the butt. And they put me in charge of something called the CNU the Affordability Task Force. I'm the chair of that. So whatever that means, I show up at the conferences and we have meetings, but not much happens. But anyway, it fascinates me to gauge the reaction to this from the new urbanists. And the reactions are like this. One group of people will say, well, okay, we have a situation here where we are not achieving our diversity, and sorry, tough luck. That's just the way it is in a Western capitalist democracy. We can't get there, but look, we're accomplishing other things. So it's kind of a go halfway and be happy with it kind of reaction. A second kind of reaction is, if we could just give it time? So in other words, build a place that is urbanistic. It's got those walkable elements, it's compact, it's contributing in that way, but over time, if you could just give it a century or two, it will become diverse. Now the problem with that is that it doesn't bear out empirically. And you would be hard-pressed to find a really beautiful, well-designed, compact neighborhood, walkable, well-serviced in the US that isn't also pretty much unaffordable. And this is the key problem with Jane Jacobs' model. Her beloved Greenwich Village, out of the question for a lot of people due to its, we love it to death, right? We love that diversity to death. And then the reaction that really has been making me crazy is this denial, in that you're wrong, we actually are affordable. New urbanist developments actually are affordable, you just don't have the right data. Well, I wasn't about to buy that, and here's my friend Andres Duani in New Orleans with his affordable housing that he just recently constructed in New Orleans. Guess what? $289 per unit, $289,000, not exactly affordable. But he's trying. He's actually one of the good guys. Okay, so now I want to tell you about two surveys that I've done on this whole issue. The first survey was actually a dissertation by a woman named Jennifer Steffel Johnson at University of Colorado. And she told me that she had done this survey of new urbanist developers trying to figure out, well, how affordable is new urbanism, or how are you able to deliver affordability? And we teamed up, and I helped her write up the results of this for a journal article. It was a mail questionnaire to 220 developers. Not a great response rate, but okay. And as it turned out, the people responding to this survey were developers who were very interested in affordable. They were affordable housing developers, a lot of them, a great majority of them. And so they were really taking advantage of the various instruments already out there to deliver affordable housing. So these are the good guys in my book. And we wrote up these results, and this was just published in Housing Policy Debate. And it basically, I think the most important result, maybe the most important table, is just showing what kinds of programs are these developers taking advantage of. And what this table shows to me, you can't read that, it's fine print, but it's all the main things, right? The tax increment financing, not tax increment, tax credit financing for affordable housing, which is the biggest source of financing for affordable housing, Hope 6, block grants, various incentive programs, infrastructure that the community provides in exchange for affordability. But the takeaway from this table for me is, God, this is complex, right? This is a lot of stuff to get into to deliver affordability in a new urbanist context. It's happening. It's a small percentage that it's happening to, but it's good news that some people are willing to do it. Now, the second survey, which is more recent and has not been published, this was a survey I did while I was at the University of Illinois, and I got some students and some money, and we went out there and looked at all the new urbanist developments we could find, and we asked them, what does it cost to live in your community? what is the cheapest possible thing? We didn't look at rental, because actually there's surprisingly not that much rental. But to buy in to a new urbanist development, what would I have to make? And this wasn't a highly rigorous study. Like, we didn't do a hedonic price model where you look at every single detail of a home so that you can compare things. But we just, we looked at, whether we assumed it would be the smallest unit in the development, and if it was, that was fine. So we wanted to know either condo or apartment or condo or duplex or multifamily apartment, whatever it is, what does it cost to buy in there? And we had, this is what we started out with, these 320 new urbanist projects. This is where they're located. And the states underneath that's a choropleth map showing where the highest density of projects. This number is actually out of date now. I read the other day 900 new urbanist developments. Now, it's really tricky to do this research because it's hard to know what's a new urbanist development and what isn't, because there's no certification process. There are a couple of groups that try to keep tabs on what's happening. And so we had to rely on their information. Also, there are some people that call their project a new urbanist development, and it's a single unit in an inner city area or something like that. So we were really focused in this research on the complete TND, transit neighborhood development, traditional neighborhood development, to try to get the sense of affordability for this project. So in the end, we got out of a total of 234 projects, because we pared down a lot of the projects we excluded for various reasons. We also really wanted to focus on the market rate situation. So we wanted to know, we took out the ones that were Hope 6 projects, because those are by definition partly affordable. We took out the ones that had been dictated or had some sort of subsidy or something like that. We wanted to know, and this is again in response to the new urbanist deniers who are giving me the line, if affordability is there, you just don't know about it. So that's what we were really trying to get at. But also the people who argue you can reach this level of affordability if you just design it right. If you just design the community with the appropriate mix of unit types, and you have really small units, those little units above the grocery store, those granny flats, the carriage houses, if you put all that in there, you will get some level of affordability. So we compared this data on what it costs to buy into these projects to the salaries of the AMI, the area median income, the teacher salary locally, this is what we got the salaries by locality, and what institutional cook, like the cook who works at the elementary school, could they buy into the new urbanist project locally? And we basically found that it looked like this. 15% was affordable to the median income, 10% to the teacher, and 0.07% to the cook. So basically, you're barely providing some housing in a walkable neighborhood in new urbanism. You're barely providing that even to the middle income. Forget about the lower income. That's not being hit at all. That's not being serviced in new urbanism. And the graph looks like this. And so, you could just spin this really negatively, but I tried to focus also on where those projects were. And I don't think I included this graph here, but the interesting thing was that those more affordable, those projects that were able to be affordable in just a market rate kind of situation, not taking advantage of any subsidies or incentives, tended to be in the Midwest on green fields, maybe around Columbus somewhere. But the ones like Newtown out of St. Lewis was one of them. Some of these you might have heard of. They tend to be larger greenfield developments in Midwest communities. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, well, these aren't affordable, but that's just because the market you're looking at is not an affordable market. So how can you expect new urbanism to be more affordable to any conventional developer in San Francisco or something like that? That's not a fair comparison. So I looked at, well, okay, what share of new housing is affordable to the cook in the US in general, in the Northeast, Midwest, and then separated out the new urbanist projects using that same kind of scale. This data, I think, needs to be redone to look at not just the regional levels on these amounts, but to really look at maybe census tracts or something like that. Overall conclusions, market rate new urbanism, mostly not affordable to middle income, not at all affordable to lower income, and lack of affordability is not just a reflection of the US market, it's really about the fact that a premium is being paid for T&D design. Okay, so armed with this information, as the official CNU Affordability Task Force chair, I went to the latest New Urbanist Conference armed with all the information about, look guys, here's what you got to do to make all these new urbanist communities you're building affordable at some level, and therefore live up to your goal of diversity. Because if you don't do that, you're leveraging diversity in this really dishonest kind of way to sell real estate, because actually this notion of diversity on some level sells to, you know, yuppie types, and they like that notion. And so you're almost worse than the gated community, because at least they're not being dishonest and trying to sell diversity. They know what they are. Okay, but you're using this new urbanist model to sell diversity. You're not diverse. So here's what you need to do. Apply for tax credits, get land acquisition funds, revolving loans, blah, 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 blah. And I brought these speakers to the New Urbanist Conference, wonderful speakers, who had all these flashy, not great PowerPoint presentations. The land trust model is a really good model for new urbanism, where you have a nonprofit entity that's owning the land and taking care of the affordability over time and making sure that it stays affordable. And I talked about, I had somebody from University of Texas who was an expert in inclusionary zoning, which new urbanists generally don't think much of, but she was talking about all the benefits of doing inclusionary zoning. And you know, the upshot of all of this effort to try to ram down the throats of new urbanist developers, all this stuff they ought to be doing, I don't think it's going anywhere. And actually, I'm not going to continue on this track because I don't think it's working. So I'm trying to, this is all pretty recent to me, and I'm not an affordable housing expert by any means, but I just really feel that it's wrong for new urbanism as a movement to kind of walk away from the notion that some part of their development needs to be affordable, and they need to be including all income levels as a really basic thing. And it also disturbs me greatly that studying what the folks were doing, the Garden Cities people 100 years ago, the Ebenezer Howards and the Clarence Steins and the you know, Patrick Geddes and these guys, they were really focused on this question. They weren't kidding around. I mean, they got into the financial aspects of development in a big way. And they, you know, people say Ebenezer Howard was completely crazy because he was like worked out all the financial details in like this incredible, you know, amazingly detailed kind of way. And so but they cared about that. And so it's, I love the new urbanist model of walkability and the what they're trying to do with sustainable neighborhoods, but they cannot walk away from the responsibility of trying to make it work. no matter how complex it is. So, but this is the way I'm thinking about it now. And if you guys, I would love to hear your reactions and critiques, because I'm at a stage where I'm, trying to work this out. But I'm thinking now that instead of trying to berate the developers to do the right thing, which they're not going to do, they might do it if you had some sort of certification process going on. Like if you could say to one of these developers, you cannot call yourself New Urbanist and sell your diversity model unless you reach this level. And actually that's what LEED ND is trying to do. But that has its own set of problems. But what if you just, I've been focusing more on what planners could do. So what if planners just had as their metric, let's try to create as complete a neighborhood as possible in every increment of development that we look at. So let's focus on our need to promote affordability in the context of walkable neighborhoods. And we have some givens. We have to deal with a certain geographical context, political realities, and our job is to try to apply the right tool in the right place. So planners, why don't we have planners be the ones who are putting the pieces together? And I'll show you just a couple examples of what I mean by this. Now here is a development outside of Denver, just going up. Urbanistically, it looks like it's working okay. I mean, maybe some of the proportions are a little odd, but instead of your standard sprawl kind of home going on here, you've got an attempt to insert some urbanism. It's contributing to the streetscape. It's contributing eventually to the walkability of that neighborhood. You're increasing density. That's a good thing. But guess what? These units are 1.2 million on the market right now. So, so in this context, maybe instead of a new urbanist showing up at the New Urbanist Conference and saying, oh, look how great my urbanistic row house is, you could have a discussion instead where you're thinking about, well, how could we maybe think about the overall affordability of the neighborhood? How are you impacting that? And this isn't necessarily rocket science or anything particularly new. The new part of it is that you are getting the planner who's in charge here of the regulatory process, and you're getting the new urbanists to think about how is this contributing or not contributing to the diverse walkable neighborhood as a whole. So maybe what you could do here is, let's say there was a land trust operating in this area outside of Denver. There have to be land trusts in Denver. Couldn't the planner, with this new development happening, think about helping the land trust buy up properties in the vicinity of this development and use those bought up properties to contribute to a neighborhood that's more complete and diverse on the whole. If this development were in Detroit, the same row house, and that is going on in some parts of Detroit, maybe there's a different kind of puzzle that the planner is putting together. Maybe it's not so much about trying to get affordable units in the immediate vicinity. Maybe it's something very different. The point is to look at every piece of development and how it contributes or doesn't contribute to that context. Now, a completely different kind of development requiring, I think, a different kind of way of looking at what tools to apply in what place. This is a Newtown development. Now, this was one of the developments that in my survey looked like it was reaching diversity, and it is. It's actually, and it's all market-based. There's no subsidy going on here. So in this case, maybe what we as planners do is we try to look at this in a more positive way, because right now a development like this is probably pretty scorned by a lot of people because it's greenfield, it's still auto-dependent, but it does have, again, if you're looking at it through this lens of, well, what is it contributing to that diversity goal that we have? And in this case, it is because this developer is so committed. This guy has an incredible personal story where he's just so committed to the new urbanist principles and wants to build diversity. And so maybe the lesson from this model is to make sure that his story and how he was able to get this diversity there by building apartments and single-family homes. He's got everything from, you know, $50,000 little tiny studio things to multi-million-dollar mansions. I'm not sure that spread is the right model necessarily for everywhere, but it's working here, and it's contributing to this diversity that we're after. So maybe our metric here is a little different for this new town. This is a development that tells a different kind of story when we're looking at this diversity goal. And this is, anybody heard of this? This is in California, in Monterey County. So we're talking high-end stuff. But these developers were amazing in that they are the ones who put together this incredibly complicated financial package. They have, first of all, there's all kinds of laws going on here for requirements for affordability. There are, but they also made use of block grants. They made use of energy tax credits. They have lots of tax credit financing going on here. They have just all these, every trick and tool of the trade is in this development. And these people are absolutely amazing. These are some of the, this is not from that development, but this is what the developer shows in his presentation to say, here's one thing we're doing. We're including everything. We've got live-work units. We've got duplexes, we've got apartments, we've got row houses, we've got carriage homes, we've got, you know, granny flats. We're putting it all together. We're doing this incredibly complicated financial package. We're creating this diverse neighborhood. And guess what? East Garrison is not working out. Sad lesson here. This is what's on their website right now. Good things come to those who wait. It's an old saying, we plan, blah, 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 blah. Even though economic conditions beyond our control have forced us to put the East Garrison community on hold for now, we're just slowing down our progress. Yeah, so it's a sad story, actually. And if you go, I think there's absolutely nothing happening there now. So the lesson here is there's sort of a different lesson here. It's that, you know, in this situation with these people putting all these tools together to make this a diverse community, totally committed developers, these are the projects we need to make sure we all know about and we support, and they're doing the right thing, and how can we lend people like this a hand, because it seems to me that they were doing the right thing. And my final example is coming at this from the other direction, and these are just affordable housing developments that I know of. And I think my idea about the planner is the one that puts the pieces together with their eyes on the goal of sustainable, walkable, diverse neighborhood. If you look at a development like this, like some of these, are these in a walkable neighborhood context? And all I'm really asking is, couldn't the planner focus a little bit more on making sure that affordability is within that, in a context, in a walkable neighborhood context? And shouldn't that be the metric? And what kinds of tools, maybe in this case it's more about design tools. Maybe it's more about design concepts, the knowledge about how to mix those different products and those different housing types all together in one development. How do you accomplish that? How could that be supported? And you know, very often there have been some skirmishes between Habitat for Humanity and New Urbanism, because sometimes Habitat homes are not about neighborhood context, maybe through no fault of their own, but there have been, I think that's turning into a more productive conversation lately. But so this is my last slide, and it's just about you know, we need, I think it's really valid to think about affordable housing in new urbanism as a way of getting to that ultimate goal, which I am not willing to back away from, and I don't think most planners are either, and that is the diverse neighborhood. And that means we need to garner whatever tool we can. We need to be sensitive to political and geographical context. And I think it's really more and more we will rely on planners to be the ones to fit the tool to the situation, to be knowledgeable about what needs to happen to make those pieces come together and make them work. And I'm hoping that whatever planners in this audience are out there, you know, might be interested in pursuing that way of looking at it. And that's the end.